Hey there. Well, these are the preliminary, very preliminary, because we've just got the beta test, some of the data results in, and I just wanted to show you guys how it's going. It's been interesting. There's some interesting stuff in there. Definitely not finished. We've got to get more data. We've got to investigate this to see what's going on. And as you'll see, we have some like, pretty rigorous plans we have going forward to test it more rigorously, I would say. But the beta test was program, and if you took part, thank you so much. It's just a great way to get the first round of results from a general population. To take a step back first is just like for those of you who haven't looked at the ketone bar yet, what is it? Well, basically, the end goal is to put it into health stores where there's a lot of healthy snack bars currently that spike your glycemic index. So you have a spike in glucose from nearly every single bar in the Whole Foods, in the Holland & Barrett, in the Planet Organic, and all of your usual health food stores in the UK. So the idea is to replace that with something which we from the ketogenic community see as a bit more healthy. So not having that glucose spike and giving you some ketone energy, so an increase in ketones. To avoid energy crash, and to give you long-lasting energy, ketones tend to last longer, and to eliminate the health consequences. So that's basically what this is all about. This is my end goal with this, what I hope to do. And I just want to talk about how preliminary the results are here, and also point out, so far I have 26 results in, so that's what this data set is. It's not huge, but it's something interesting, and there's stuff interesting that's coming out of it. And the results may change because as you get more information, I'm talking to the beta test participants, sometimes asking them for clarifications and so on, or asking them to test hypotheses if they're happy to do that. And in some cases they are, and that's helping to clarify the data and so on. So very preliminary. And it's not a study. And what I mean by that is basically, I sent the bars out to a bunch of people, and they're testing at home with different meters and different circumstances, and it's not controlled at all. So it's not like a study where you're trying to control the situation. It's a very variable population, different lifestyles, lots going on using different tracking devices and so on. So it's a little bit different from a study, just to point that out. All use their own home glucose and ketone meters, and there were quite a number of different devices, and in some cases the data actually did look erroneous. So I looked at the readings and I felt that it wasn't correct. And I have quite a bit of experience with comparing glucose meters in particular. I find the ketone meters in general are quite good and quite consistent, but glucose meters, actually sometimes there is a variance of about 1 millimolar, which as you'll see is quite significant when we're talking about the results we're talking about today. So in particular the glucose readings, not as trustworthy, and would like to do some more investigation in that area. So as I said, I'm trying to qualify or retest and better understand that data, and that's hopefully how we'll get some improvements over time, plus adding more data from different people. So what we did is we proposed to the beta testers they could do it two ways. They could do a quick and dirty approach, whereby they're taking two readings, one reading at say 3 p.m. and then another reading at 2 hours later at 5 p.m. to capture most of the change. 2 hours is a good point to do that. And we also gave them instructions not to exercise or do any strenuous physical activity, because that would change both the glucose and the ketone readings, and also not to eat 3 hours before starting the test. And then they would eat the ketone bar at 3 p.m. Immediately after that taking a reading at 3 p.m., they would eat the ketone bar, and then we'd see the change at 5 p.m. If they wanted to do the accurate approach, and virtually everyone actually went for the accurate approach, I was really happily surprised that everyone was really interested in understanding their metabolism like this, and of course it's provided more interesting data for us. So this is 4 readings, and to see how it changes between 3 and say 6 p.m. over a 3-hour period, and that 3-hour period tends to capture pretty much everything that's gonna change. Your ketones may change a little bit afterwards. There'll be some residual impact from the ketone boost, for instance. But overall, you're capturing most of the big changes and everything. So it's that's why we call it the accurate approach. So I think 90 90% of people did this approach. And here are the results. And what I've done here is I've split out the results in terms of their actual impact. So the change in glucose or the change in ketones. So did it increase ketones, which is the blue? Did it increase glucose, which is the red, or vice versa? And what we're looking for is an increase. So the blue going up. If you see this arrow here, the blue going up is what we're looking for. The ketones going up, and the red going down is what we're looking for. On this graph, we're using the 1 millimolar, which is usually used in the UK. If you're not used to that, 1 millimolar is about 18 milligrams per deciliter. So, from the US readings and so on. So we're not talking about huge changes, but they're big enough to have an impact on ketosis. So the other thing to say is that what we did is we learned from these results that there were various situations which we wanted to account for. So things like sleep deprivation, fasting before the tests, we looked at illness or medical conditions, if you'd exercised just before the test, if you'd had other foods and drinks within the 6-hour period. We wanted to know about that. And these were the types of confounders, the things we felt could influence the readings that we wanted to know about. So what I've done here is I split the results out by the people who said, yes, I had some trouble with sleep. Maybe, I slept only 2 hours last night. And I have to say, actually, one of the interesting things was how many people have had sleep issues on the particular days they were doing these tests. So I don't know if it's consistent, but there did seem to be a lot of people having trouble with sleep. So basically we would separate these out. So the people with no confounders mean none of these things. They didn't have sleep deprivation. They weren't fasting before the test. And when I say fasting, it means they didn't fast for 20 or 48 hours before the test, because some people did. And then they didn't have any illness, or they weren't exercising or having other foods and drinks. So the interesting thing, what is that you look on the left with the no confounders, there's a slight decrease in glucose, and there's a moderate increase in ketones. This actually looks very similar to the graphs we've had internally. So the ones that were kind of more interesting for me to see were the ones where these are changing over time, where the sleep deprivation was very interesting there. You can see there's a big effect. And so that's this one here. You can see there's a drop in ketones, which is quite significant, and there's a slight rise in glucose there. And then the illness was pretty significant here. We can see there's quite a big rise in the glucose, and there's a slight drop in the ketones. And we'll talk a little bit more about what went on in the food and drinks there. But you can see it's variable responses, which, by the way, is what we see in our consulting practice all the time. People have variable responses, and you just can't say that there's a cookie cutter approach to being in ketosis, doing a ketogenic diet and fasting, or any of the foods you're eating. It really is an individual thing. And so hopefully this is interesting to you, some of the things that can affect these variances from one person to the other. This graph is looking at the ketone change because it's a ketone bar. So obviously you're going to be interested in its ketogenic potential and if it's increasing ketones. So 63% of people saw an increase in ketones. From the left to the right here, we have the number of confounders. So basically 0 is the same as the graph here, no confounders at all, which means we considered that there's nothing we've identified. I'm sure there are other factors which could be influencing the readings. So you see a range of different increase in ketone from hardly anything here up to pretty significant here. And this was actually 32% of people who tested. Then we had a slightly larger proportion who had at least one confounder. So that could have been anything. That could have been sleep deprivation, that could have been exercising before, illness, and the other ones we mentioned on the slide. And there we see, that there's a variance between positive, going up to 0.7 millimolar, and going negative 0.7 millimolar. And because it's one factor, it could be anything. It could be the sleep, It could be the fasting, it could be the illness, it could be any of those, and that probably accounts, when we're looking at this kind of thing, it accounts for it as a variance because it's actually different factors we're talking about. Now, if they had two of these factors, so combining two of any of these factors, then they had this slight range. And then if they had three factors, which is the highest altogether, so say they were ill, they got sleep deprived, and they ate or had some food or something in the time zone, then they would be there, for example. And what we saw here, which was a little bit interesting, is that there's a slight positive correlation here, or negative correlation. So I should say the more confounding factors, the more negative the ketone response. It's a small data set. We just found it interesting at this stage. As you can see, like most people don't have the three confounding factors. Really, the majority of people have a more simple situation. So basically, it's possible that when we're investigating these factors as we go forward, we'll find that the people who have the most confounders are sleep issues, illness problems, stress, exercising, say very consistent every single day, so it's affecting their readings. Then they're going to record potentially lower ketone responses, blood ketones in this case. So this is just a hypothesis to test, just something interesting. Here we have the no confounders, so the simplest people who we didn't see any variables which might affect the readings. And here you see that basically towards the end of the 3-hour period, they have a slight trail off of their glucose down here. Okay, so it's only 0.5 millimolar max, so that is just 10 milligrams per deciliter. And here you see there's about 0.8 rise over time of their ketones. So that's basically what we would have expected, similar to our internal data, as I said, in terms of the pattern. And in this one, we're looking at sleep deprivation because that's the one of the more interesting ones I felt. And then you see this slight over the first hour, you see a slight increase in the glucose, and it actually goes slightly under, which is quite typical of glucose, right? It goes up and down, and it tends to go up a little bit over and down underneath if it's had a little bit of a push up. With the ketones, what we see is like a consistent drop by 0.5 millimolar. So, that's interesting. And I will tell you that, my own personal results, if I've been sleep deprived and I go and get some lab tests, they can look completely different. I recently had a blood test come back which made me look sort of, insulin resistant and other things going on. And I had, my blood glucose for fasting was 100 milligrams per deciliter, which would never be the case. I'm normally 80 or a maximum of 90, something like that, depending on what's been going on. So, sleep deprivation, is shown in the research, can really affect your readings quite quickly. And that blood test I was telling you about seemed, it was related to actually illness and some really bad sleep. So when you're taking readings, you have to just take that into context. If you slept 2 hours last night, you're not going to expect to get the normal readings. And I'm telling you this because some people stress about their readings with their glucose in there, and their glucose is too high, their ketones are too low when they're doing a ketogenic diet and so on. And if you have been sleeping really badly the last couple of nights, then you want to discount this information, and you want to try and wait to act and change your diet or change lifestyle factors. And actually sleep is one of the biggest ones that we also talk with clients a lot because it does affect these readings quite a bit. Ketone bar metabolism with illness and medical condition, we saw this was the most extreme one. So here you see, this is an average, by the way, of people. So the glucose is going up and there's a slight drop in ketones there again. So it's not a big, drop in ketones. For most people, it's not going to affect their ketosis. But illness due to inflammation and other issues does tend to drive glucose. So I think this is really interesting to look into because when you're ill, is your response to foods different? Like no matter what the food is it like a ketone bar or is it some other type of food? Your glucose response to any food intake is gonna be different. I don't know. That's something that we're gonna look in the research for and try to understand this and then explore it with giving people ketone bars and other things and see if it makes a difference. So the takeaways. The response to ketone bars isn't identical for everyone, which I was expecting, of course. But it's interesting to see what might be affecting it. The normal response seems to be that there's a slight decrease in blood glucose and the increase in blood ketones about 0.8 millimolar. The different responses may be linked to other variables in lifestyle, the largest of which are probably sleep deprivation, less sleep than usual. So a lot of people, they were giving me examples like I slept 2 hours or, my sleep was broken. So I woke for 2 or 3 hours in the middle of the night, or I just felt like I had really bad sleep. This is the kind of examples we're getting. Illness, sickness, so people that said they had cold, they had flu, or they actually had a medical condition. Taking other food and drink around the same time. So some people sometimes weren't aware that some of the things they were eating or drinking could affect it, or just because of their lifestyle they couldn't have a 6-hour period without food which they could control. So I think the main interesting one for you guys here is caffeine in black coffee. Some substances that you take, so people are taking like black coffee or maybe even a strong tea, and that can affect glucose ketone readings. But it depends, it's variable, it depends on your genetics, and it can also depend on how long you've been taking it and your use over time. So that's actually a complicated subject, but it's another confounder because if you are taking caffeine in black coffees, for example, we don't even know which way it's going to bias the readings unless we start looking into the genetics and all the other things, or we just test you another time with just the coffee. So that's something to watch out for. Now, the ketone bar, where are we at? So I've spent over a year now developing this, a lot of R&D and prototyping, and a lot of internal testing to make sure that the blood readings were coming back how we wanted them. And right now, we've just done the beta test down here. And the next point is to go to a research study. So the beta test results are still coming in, and I may give you another update when we've got more information on this, or we've explored more of the issues to try and clarify what's really going on here. But the research study, we're really using all this information we're getting from the beta test to inform the research study that we're going to be doing, where we're going to have a day in London, and we're going to have a lot of people who've signed up for this study come down, and we're going to make it an educational, a fun day, but also we're going to go into the lab and we're going to get proper tests done, so it's more rigorously done, and we're going to control for confounders a bit better because we'll have you for the whole day, 9 till 5. We'll be able to organize the day and everything and control these things. So it'll be a proper controlled study. And the beta test is helping us because it's identifying all of these interesting things which may affect it. And then we can control for those and really understand it in the study properly. And then, later on this year, we're gonna publish that research, and then we'll go on to the next paper. Whatever interesting stuff will come out of the papers, and then we'll choose what we're going to study next. Right now, because people have been asking me, when are these going to be available? When are they going to be out? So right now we're doing factory trials, which is relatively complex because basically you're moving out from a small lab / kitchen environment where you've been able to use the kind of kitchen equipment you've probably seen or a bit larger, but not factory machinery, which is completely different. And sometimes you have to change how you work, you have to test, you have to trial to get the same result as you're getting in the kitchen. So that's currently what we're working on now before we go to factory production. So I'm hoping basically in a few weeks we're doing another trial which we think will go fine, and that's a couple of weeks, and then we're going to be moving a couple of weeks or maybe a month afterwards to the full factory production, and then they're shipping. So they're not far out now. I just want to give you an update on that, and that's that. So if you would like more information, for instance, you'd like to be part of a study, you'd like to learn more about your metabolism, we're going to make it a learning event, we're going to be controlling for more things, and we're going to be doing more lab tests to understand things better, then you can just go to ketosource.co.uk /study. If you want to learn more about the details of the testing protocol we gave to people for the beta test, if you weren't in the beta test, go to kiddersource.co.uk/beta test, and there's all the information there. There's the frequently asked questions that we got from beta testers and so on. And I'll actually be updating that over time as we potentially take on other beta testers and so on. Anyway, thanks for listening. Hope this has been interesting for you, and I'll talk to you soon.